concepts such as individual rights, reason, logic, and the scientific method. He rejects these ideas as white constructs and impediments to a better society.
Oh my fucking God. I'm honestly speechless. Like, I can hardly believe that this is even real. Okay, apparently this is some documentary that was shot of a white privilege conference. That's actually what they called it. That's not what I'm calling it. It happened back in like 2014, which was mandatory for some teachers and employees. And just to showcase how absolutely fucking insane this is, the way this video is shot and how the ideas are described give off a sort of Project Veritas expose vibe, but no. This is an actual official video made by a blog called Progressive Today that advocates for these things. This is something which was put out thinking that this was a good representation of their ideas and that this is what they thought was going to sell their ideas to people.
Racism is central to America. It's central to how the country was developed. It is central to how it operates right now. And if you don't understand that, you can't actually understand how the country is developing and has developed.
If it is such an unquestionable truth that institutional racism exists and that's what the United States was founded upon, how come there is not a single piece of evidence which has been put forward to support this claim? I mean, the closest thing you have to proof of this claim would be the Civil Rights Act and slavery. The Civil Rights Act passed in 1965, and slavery was abolished in 1865. And prior to 1856, no one was considered a citizen unless they had 5 acres of property, so clearly it's not institutional.
White supremacy has been embedded in the United States of America from its founding.
And right now, I'm going to suggest to you that race is driving almost everything that's happening in the country.
This is one space in our white supremacist nation where people of color can say, okay, this one space for this 1 hour is just about us.
The mere fact that you can even have a conference like that completely debunks the idea that the US is an institutionally racist nation which was founded on racism. Also, this conference happened in 2014, so at the time, the president was a black guy. How can you say that with a straight face?
The White Privilege Conference, or WPC, is an annual gathering of thousands of private and public educators, students, and school administrators from across the country. Participants examine and confront what they see as systemic race-based privilege in America.
See, I'm telling you, with that really sinister music that they're playing in the background, I swear to God, I didn't even add that in. That music in the background, that's from the original documentary. And the incredibly exaggerated imagery, which just borders on being comical. I can't be the only one who thinks that this looks like an expose of the insanity of this idea, rather than an explanation of what it is. That would be like making an anime documentary and then starting off with a clip like this.
I wasn't looking or anything. I just happened to be walking by. It'd be creepy to know where you live. Stupid! What was I walking by for? Okay! I had to give you something! Listen, don't get the wrong idea. I was just up at 4 a.m. cooking, like schoolgirls do, and it happened to be your favorite, and I thought maybe you'd like some since I had extra.
But the institutionalized racism that is in America can't be denied. It can't be. I mean, you can't really argue against it. It is what it is, and this country was built on white principles for white people.
There are many valid critiques with the concept of a government, and this is not one of them. Like, for example, how despite you never signing the so-called social contract, you still have to submit to it, or how by design a government monopolizes the market. But correct me if I'm wrong, but there's no place in the US Constitution where it explicitly calls for white supremacy. As a matter of fact, even when slavery was in the Constitution, it never mentioned anything about the slaves being black. The only reason the slaves came from the tropics was because of the already established trade routes with Europe, and the only reason those routes were established the way they were was because tobacco and sugarcane grew easier in those areas.
We, the people. So if we go back to the Constitution, we the people, who was it? White men, land-owning, wealthy, Christian, they claimed to be straight at the time, who knows?
The only one of those things ever mentioned in the Constitution was the ownership of land. Everything else about white, Christian, and wealthy, you pulled that directly out of your ass.
In our nation, racism, white people do not experience racism. White people can experience discrimination, but not racism.
Stop with the fucking revisionism. Race is not prejudice plus power. It's the belief that race is the determining factor in someone's characteristics. The fact that you quacks have to invent your own definition because the reality of what you were claiming was so absurd that no amount of mental contortions could have justified your position, with racism being established as what it is, really shows just how weak and pathetic the belief of white privilege really is.
The WPC describes itself as a private event, but the Wisconsin Reporter revealed that at least tens of thousands of local, state, and federal tax dollars were spent this year to send teachers, students, and administrators to the conference.
Please explain to me again how we live in a white supremacist nation when the government is spending tens of thousands of taxpayer dollars to fund your event and to force people to attend your event. Either you're full of shit, or we have the most incompetently run racist system ever. So incompetent, as a matter of fact, that it's institutionalized social justice, an ideology which teaches people that everything is racist, even the things that aren't.
Are you guys in high school, or are you here on a college? Oh, that's awesome. Are you in high school?
I am in high school.
Oh, that's awesome. Are you guys high school students?
Yeah.
That's awesome. What do you do?
I work for the Department of Ed.
The Department of Education. That's great. In Wisconsin, or okay.
Yeah.
I'll just add this to the list of reasons as to why I'm never sending my kids to public school.
And there are a ton of high school teachers here. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Do you guys know how many? Like, 'cause I saw a bunch of high school kids.
I just talked to one of my friends who works in a district, and he said he had 45 staff here. So.
Wow, 45 staff.
Founded in 1999, the WPC's mission is to arm educators with the tools they need to teach white privilege theory in America's school system.
Institutionalizing a fundamentally flawed ideology is not a good thing. Why are you presenting this as something that you think people should get behind?
But what exactly is meant by white privilege?
This is where it starts to get fucking good.
Simply put, proponents of white privilege argue that white racism is institutional, structural, and pervades all aspects of American society. White privilege, they contend, is the deliberate invention of capitalists, whose goal is to keep labor divided along racial lines.
Aside from this being yet another nonsensical conspiracy theory, and the theorists and the narrator not having any idea what capitalism is, this proves that social justice is directly influenced by Marxism. So, Marxists, will you admit now that cultural Marxism is a thing, or will you continue your absurd reality denial by claiming that if you believe cultural Marxism is real, then you're a Hitler lover?
In her keynote address, Professor Jacqueline Battalora argues that colonial-era anti-miscegenation laws which forbade white women from marrying black men, created a system of social privileges for whites that continues to this day.
Okay, well, colonialism and government regulations have nothing to do with capitalism, so what the fuck does capitalism have to do with any of this?
So they passed the law of 1681. And in this law, it made it illegal for British and other white women from marrying a Negro slave. And furthermore, the law punished any landholder who encouraged the marriages and any religious authority who performed it. This law equals the invention of the human category white.
No, that was the invention of a very racist law. Racial genetic differences are biological. Bone structure formation, for example, has been used by forensic scientists to identify the race of murder victims since forensic science has existed. It's obvious that, people should be treated as individuals because they have self-ownership, but to say that there's no difference between people of different races in any regard, that's simply scientifically inaccurate.
This history teaches us that white is the tool by which laborers were divided.
What does marriage have to do with the labor force? Bitch, do you even know what words mean?
Those who shared the same living conditions, the same opportunities, now experience ourselves as more connected with Paris Hilton than with our African American neighbor.
This is the biggest problem with collectivism. Any claim that someone makes when speaking on behalf of a collective is effectively unverifiable because collectivists fail to realize this one basic truth: that all people are individuals, and there are no two people in the world who are exactly the same as one another. So, to collectivize an entire group of people for any reason based on any identity is an intellectual absurdity.
Berkeley law professor John A. Powell offers a deeper analysis, arguing in his keynote address that modern capitalism is the consequence of flawed concepts dating to the Age of Enlightenment. Concepts such as individual rights, reason, logic, and the scientific method. He rejects these ideas as white constructs and impediments to a better society.
What the fuck? Individual rights, reason, logic, and science are all racist because capitalism and therefore should be rejected. Gotcha. I mean, that totally doesn't want to fucking make me kill myself or anything.
So whiteness actually is very tied to our modern sense of the self. And this was part of what's called the Enlightenment Project. So that project, which goes back to people like Descartes. Remember Descartes, where he says, I think, therefore I am? So you have the separation of mind and body. You have the separation of the mind, rational mind, from nature. So this radical individual that perceives himself, and it largely was a him, as being isolated from each other, isolated from nature, hostile to nature, in a scary world, was also a white self.
Holy fucking shit, I can't believe this is real. I love how the irony just completely escapes him. That he's basically claiming that black people are incapable of being individuals who can think for themselves. Just completely incapable of thinking through his implications.
So the expression of the self, the modern self, is actually racialized.
Hear that, kids? If you don't look at people as collectives, and you do think about things objectively rather than emotionally, well, then you're a racist. Good fucking lord, these people. Anyway, if you liked my video, please comment, rate, and subscribe, and if you really liked it, please consider donating to any of my various crowdfunding pages. Also, just a quick update, I'm no longer on Facebook, and I will not be returning to Facebook, so any followers through Facebook, I'm now going to exclusively be on my other social media pages. So, thank you all, and I'll see you next time.